What would you do if your single act of kindness during a blizzard brought 5 Rolls-Royce vehicles to your trailer door the very next morning? This is the incredible story of Nash Rodriguez, a struggling single father and skilled mechanic living in a modest trailer in Raven Falls, Montana, whose life changed forever when he stopped to help a stranded motorist during one of the worst winter storms in decades. Nash had no idea that the elegant woman whose luxury sedan had broken down on the treacherous mountain highway was actually Evangeline Kingsley, one of the wealthiest business executives in North America. He simply saw someone in trouble and did what his heart told him was right, despite his own desperate financial situation and the dangerous conditions that could have cost him his life. The mysterious arrival of those 5 gleaming Rolls-Royce vehicles at Silver Dollar Mobile Estates the next morning sent shockwaves through the small Montana community and revealed a connection between Nash and this powerful stranger that would transform everything he thought he knew about his future. Quick pause before we continue. Tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you're enjoying these stories, make sure to hit subscribe because tomorrow's episode is absolutely mind-blowing. The alarm clock's shrill cry pierced through the thin walls of the double-wide trailer at exactly 5:30 in the morning, just as it had every day for the past 6 months. Nash Rodriguez rolled over in the narrow bed, his calloused hand slapping the snooze button with practiced precision. The digital display cast an eerie green glow across his weathered face, highlighting the lines that seemed to have deepened since his 34th birthday last month. "Daddy, are you awake?" came a small voice from the adjacent room, separated only by a thin accordion door that had seen better days. "I'm up, sweetheart," Nash called back, his voice still thick with sleep. "Give me 5 minutes and I'll start." Breakfast. Nash swung his legs over the side of the bed, his bare feet hitting the cold linoleum floor with a soft thud. The trailer's heating system worked overtime during these Montana winters, but it still struggled to keep up with the relentless cold that seemed to seep through every crack and crevice. He pulled on a worn flannel shirt and jeans that had been patched more times than he cared to count, each repair telling a story of hard work and making do with what little they had. The narrow hallway leading to the kitchen stretched barely 6 feet, but Nash had learned to navigate it in the dark. 8-year-old Sky Rodriguez was already sitting at the small dinette table, her dark hair tousled from sleep, wearing the same purple pajamas she'd worn for the past 3 nights. Nash made a mental note to do laundry later, assuming the washing machine in the community laundry room wasn't broken again. "Morning, little star," Nash said, ruffling his daughter's hair as he passed by to start the coffee maker. The ancient machine gurgled to life, a sound that had become as comforting as it was necessary to his daily routine. "Are we having pancakes today?" Sky asked hopefully, her brown eyes following her father's movements around the cramped kitchen. Nash opened the refrigerator and surveyed their dwindling supplies. 2 eggs, a half-empty gallon of milk that would expire tomorrow, and some leftover spaghetti from 2 nights ago. The pancake mix sat in the cabinet, but using it now would mean having nothing for tomorrow morning. "How about scrambled eggs and on toast?" Nash suggested, already reaching for the eggs. "I'll make them extra fluffy, just the way you like them." "Okay, Daddy," Sky replied, though Nash could hear the slight disappointment in her voice. She never complained, not really, but he knew she noticed when their meals became repetitive, when new clothes appeared less frequently, when their outings to town became shorter and less frequent. Nash cracked the eggs into a bowl, his movements automatic, while his mind wandered to the growing stack of bills sitting on the kitchen counter. The rent for their spot at Silver Dollar Mobile Estates was due in 4 days, and he was still $200 short. The electric bill had arrived yesterday, with a bright red notice threatening disconnection if payment wasn't received within 10 days. His mobile mechanic business, Rodriguez Mobile Mechanics, had seen only 3 customers in the past 2 weeks, and winter always brought fewer calls anyway. "Daddy, why do you look sad?" Sky asked, her small chin propped on her hands as she watched him cook. Nash forced a smile and turned to face his daughter. "I'm not sad, sweetheart. Just thinking about work stuff, boring grown-up things." "Is it about money again?" she asked with the unsettling perceptiveness that children sometimes possessed. Nash paused, the spatula halfway to the pan. He'd tried so hard to shield Sky from their financial struggles, but living in 300 square feet made privacy nearly impossible. She'd heard the phone calls with creditors, witnessed the conversations with Bonnie Thompson next door, when Nash had to ask for small loans, observed the careful way he counted change at the grocery store. "Sometimes grown-ups have to worry about money, baby, but that's not your job. Your job is to be 8 years old and learn new things and have fun," Nash said, setting a plate of eggs and toast in front of her. Sky picked up her fork, but didn't start eating immediately. Bobby Martinez at school said his dad got a new job that pays lots of money. He said they're going to move to a bigger house with a pool. Nash sat down across from his daughter with his own plate, considerably smaller than hers. "That's nice for Bobby's family. We might not have a pool, but we have other things that are pretty special." "Like what?" Sky asked, taking a small bite of eggs. "Like Saturday morning pancakes when I have pancake mix," Nash said, earning a giggle from his daughter. "And like our special spot by Miller's Creek where we go fishing in the summer. And like how we can see more stars from our back porch than people in the city ever get to see. And like how you can fix anything that's broken," Sky added, her face brightening. "Well, almost anything," Nash corrected, though her words brought a genuine smile to his face. The truth was, Nash Rodriguez could fix more things than most people in Raven Falls combined. He'd inherited his mechanical aptitude from his father, who'd been the best mechanic in 3 counties before his death 5 years ago. Nash had worked at Rocky Mountain Manufacturing Plant for 8 years, maintaining and repairing the heavy machinery that kept the facility running 24 hours a day. His supervisors had praised his diagnostic skills, his ability to troubleshoot problems that stumped engineers with college degrees. Then the plant had closed 6 months ago, citing economic pressures and the need to consolidate operations. 347 people lost their jobs in a single day, including Nash. The severance package had lasted exactly 2 months, and unemployment benefits barely covered their basic expenses. Nash had tried to find work at other facilities, but opportunities for experienced mechanics were scarce in rural Montana, especially during winter months when construction and outdoor work slowed to a crawl. Starting Rodriguez Mobile Mechanics had seemed like the logical solution. Nash had converted his pickup truck into a mobile repair unit, investing his last $800 in tools and equipment. He'd printed business cards at the local copy shop and distributed them throughout Raven Falls and the surrounding communities. The work was sporadic but honest, and Nash took pride in every successful repair, every satisfied customer who spread word about his reliable service. "Daddy, are you going to work today?" Sky asked, interrupting his thoughts. Nash glanced out, the window at the grey sky that promised more snow. "I'm hoping Wade Johnson calls about that generator he wants me to look at. If not, I might drive around town and see if anyone needs help with their car. Can I come with you after school?" "We'll see, sweetheart. Depends on what kind of work comes up." Nash finished his breakfast quickly and helped Sky get ready for school. Her backpack was patched in 2 places, and her winter coat was 2 sizes too big, a hand-me-down from Bonnie Thompson's granddaughter. But Sky wore everything with the unconscious confidence of childhood, unaware that her appearance marked her as one of the struggling families in their small community. "Have a good day at school," Nash said, kissing the top of her head as they waited for the school bus at the end of their gravel driveway. "I will, Daddy. Maybe Lisa Rodriguez will let us work on math problems together again. She's really good at explaining fractions." Nash watched the yellow bus disappear around the bend, then returned to the trailer to prepare for another uncertain day. He checked his phone for messages, hoping to find a voicemail from a potential customer, but the screen remained blank. The weather forecast called for heavy snow starting late afternoon, which would likely keep people indoors and reduce his chances of finding work. He spent the morning organizing his tools and updating his business records, a task that took longer than necessary because he performed it with meticulous care. Every receipt was filed, every expense logged, every potential tax deduction noted. Nash had learned that attention to detail often made the difference between success and failure when resources were limited. By noon, the first snowflakes began to fall, large and lazy at first, then gradually increasing in intensity. Nash stood at the trailer's front window, watching the world slowly turn white, and wondered what the evening would bring. He had no idea that within 12 hours, his life would change in ways he couldn't possibly imagine, all because of a decision he would make when faced with a stranger's desperate need for help during what would become one of the worst blizzards in Raven Falls history. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The afternoon brought no phone calls, no knocks on the door, and no opportunities to earn the money Nash desperately needed. He spent the time reviewing repair manuals and watching the snow accumulate outside his window. By 3 o'clock, the weather had transformed from a gentle snowfall into something more ominous, with wind gusts rattling the trailer's aluminum, siding and visibility dropping to less than 50 feet. Nash's phone buzzed with a text message from Lisa Rodriguez, Sky's teacher. School dismissing early due to weather conditions. Buses departing at 3:30. He quickly bundled up in his heaviest coat and drove his pickup truck to the school, arriving just as children began streaming out of the building. Sky appeared in the doorway, her small figure almost lost among the older students, and Nash felt the familiar tightness in his chest that came whenever he realized how vulnerable she seemed in the world. "Hi, Daddy," Sky called out, running toward the truck through the swirling snow. "We got to leave school early because of the storm." "I can see that," Nash replied, helping her into the passenger seat. "How was your day before the weather got crazy?" "Lisa Rodriguez helped me with my reading homework, and we learned about the water cycle in science class. Did you know that snow is just frozen water vapor?" Nash smiled despite his worries. "I did know that, but I bet you learned some new details about it." "Yeah, and Jimmy Patterson brought his dad's old radio to show and tell. It was from like 50 years ago, but it still worked. Mr. Foster let us tune in different stations during lunch." As they drove through the increasingly treacherous streets of Raven Falls, Nash found himself thinking about his own childhood, when his father, Robert Rodriguez, had owned and operated Rodriguez Auto Repair on Main Street. Those had been different times when the town was more prosperous and people could afford regular car maintenance. Nash remembered spending afternoons in the garage, watching his father diagnose engine problems with nothing more than his ears. And his hands. "Your grandfather would have loved this weather," Nash said, navigating carefully around a stalled car. "He always said that winter storms brought out the best and worst in people." "What did he mean by that?" Sky asked, pressing her face against the passenger window to watch the snow. "Well, some people get scared and hide inside until the storm passes, but other people see the storm as a chance to help their neighbors, to show what they're made of. When things get difficult, which kind of person are you, Daddy?" Nash considered the question as he turned into Silver Dollar Mobile Estates, the gravel road already covered with 3 inches of snow. I guess I'm the kind who can't sit still when I know people might need help. The trailer park consisted of 38 mobile homes arranged in rough rows, connected by narrow roads that the county plowed only when absolutely necessary. Nash's trailer sat near the back of the property, next to Bonnie Thompson's slightly larger, double-wide. Bonnie had lived at Silver Dollar for 15 years and served as the unofficial community coordinator, organizing food drives during holidays and keeping track of which neighbors might need assistance. Nash, honey, come here a minute," Bonnie called from her front porch as Nash and Sky climbed out of the truck. Nash walked over to where the 67-year-old woman stood wrapped in a thick wool coat, her gray hair whipping around her. "Face in the wind. This storm's gonna be a bad one," Bonnie said, raising her voice over the howling wind. "Weather service says we could get 18 inches before morning. I'm worried about the Morales family at the end of the row. Their heating system's been acting up, and with 3 little ones. I can take a look at it," Nash offered immediately. "Probably just needs a new thermostat or some ductwork adjustment." "You're a blessing, Nash Rodriguez. I don't know what this community would do without you." Nash felt heat rise in his cheeks despite the cold air. "We all help each other out. That's what neighbors do." "I know, honey, but you do more than most. Speaking of which, how are things going with your business? Getting enough calls to keep you busy?" Nash glanced toward his trailer, where Sky was visible through the window, probably starting her homework at the kitchen table. "It's been slow, but winter's always tough for mobile work. Things will pick up when the weather improves." Bonnie studied his face with the sharp eyes of someone who'd raised 5 children and buried 2 husbands. "Nash, you know if you need anything." "We're doing fine, Bonnie, really, but I appreciate you looking out for us." Nash spent the next hour at the Morales family's trailer, replacing a faulty heating element and adjusting their ductwork to improve air circulation. Carlos Morales tried to pay him, but Nash waved away the $20 bill. "Save your money for groceries," Nash said. "Just remember to call me if you have any other problems." "You're too generous, Nash," Maria Morales said, bouncing their youngest child on her hip. "How can we repay you? By staying warm and safe during this storm. That's payment enough." Nash returned to his own trailer as darkness fell and the storm intensified. The wind now howled continuously, creating a sound like a freight train that never quite passed by. Sky had finished her homework and was curled up on the small couch, reading a library book about horses. "Are you hungry, sweetheart?" Nash asked, checking their food supplies again. "A little bit. Can we have the leftover spaghetti?" Nash heated the remaining pasta, stretching it with some canned tomatoes and frozen vegetables. They ate dinner by candlelight when the electricity flickered several times, and Nash told Sky stories about growing up in Raven Falls, about ice skating on Miller's Creek, and sledding down the hills behind the old church. "Daddy, do you miss Grandpa?" Sky asked as Nash tucked her into bed. "Every day," Nash admitted, "but I think about the things he taught me, and it's like he's still here helping me figure out problems." "Do you think he would be proud of us?" Nash smoothed her hair away from her forehead. "I know he would be. He'd be proud of how smart you're getting in school, and how kind you are to your friends, and how brave you are even when things get tough. I'm not always brave. Sometimes I get scared about money stuff." Nash sat down on the edge of her bed, choosing his words carefully. "Being scared doesn't mean you're not brave, Sky. Being brave means doing what you need to do even when you're scared. And you do that every day." After Sky fell asleep, Nash sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and the stack of bills he'd been avoiding. The numbers hadn't changed since morning, but seeing them written in black and white made their situation feel more pressing. Rent, $450, electric, $187, phone, $65, groceries, approximately $100 per week. His savings account contained exactly $38.16. His checking account held $112. The cash in his wallet amounted to $23 and some change. Unless he found work soon, they would be in serious trouble within 2 weeks. Nash pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contact list, considering which friends or former co-workers he might call for job leads. Most of the men he'd worked with at Rocky Mountain Manufacturing were struggling just as much as he was. Some had relocated to other states, chasing rumors of work in oil fields or construction projects. Others had taken part-time jobs that paid a fraction of their former wages. The storm raged outside with increasing ferocity, and Nash found himself thinking about the road conditions on Highway 89, the main route that connected Raven Falls to the larger towns and cities where emergency services were based. If someone broke down on that stretch of road during a storm like this, they could be in serious danger. The temperature was dropping towards zero, and visibility was near nothing. Nash had driven Highway 89 hundreds of times in all kinds of weather. He knew every curve, every steep grade, every spot where snow tended to drift across the pavement. He also knew that his pickup truck, equipped with four-wheel drive and winter tires, could handle conditions that would stop most other vehicles. At 11:30, Nash's phone rang. The caller ID showed Wade Johnson's name. "Nash, thank God you answered." Wade's voice crackled through the poor connection. "I just got a call from a motorist stranded about 10 miles north of town on Highway 89. Sounds like a broken-down luxury car with someone inside who's getting pretty scared." 10 miles north? That's right in the worst part of the pass, Nash said, already reaching for his coat. "I know it's dangerous out there, but my tow truck won't make it in this weather, and the county says they can't get a crew out until morning at the earliest. This person's been stuck for over an hour already." Nash looked through the kitchen window at the white wall of snow that had swallowed the world beyond his porch light. Any reasonable person would stay inside until the storm passed. Any responsible father would think twice about venturing out into conditions that could easily prove fatal. "Give me the exact location," Nash said, grabbing his keys and tool bag. "I'm on my way." Nash quickly scribbled a note for Skye in case she woke up, explaining that he'd gone to help someone and would be back soon. He placed it on her nightstand, next to the small lamp she sometimes turned on when thunderstorms frightened her. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was leaving her alone during the worst blizzard in years, but 8-year-olds slept deeply, and Bonnie Thompson was only 30 feet away if an emergency arose. He loaded his pickup truck with additional tools, jumper cables, a tow strap, emergency flares, and 2 heavy blankets. The emergency kit he kept in his vehicle year-round included water, energy bars, a first aid kit, and a battery-powered radio. Nash had learned from his father that Montana winters demanded respect and preparation. "Please let this be something simple," Nash muttered as he started the engine and let it warm up. The truck's headlights barely penetrated the wall of snow that seemed to press against the windshield like a living thing. The drive out of Silver Dollar Mobile Estates proved treacherous enough. The gravel roads had disappeared under 6 inches of snow, and Nash had to navigate by memory and the occasional glimpse of a mailbox or fence post. The truck's four-wheel drive system engaged with a mechanical clunk, and Nash felt the reassuring grip of winter tires finding purchase on the hidden road surface. Reaching Highway 89 took 20 minutes instead of the usual 5. The state highway department had abandoned their plowing efforts hours ago, leaving the road in the hands of nature. Nash turned north toward the mountain pass, where someone waited in conditions that could prove fatal within hours. The highway climbed steadily through stands of pine and aspen, their branches heavy with snow that occasionally crashed down onto the roadway. Nash drove at 15 miles per hour, his hands gripping the steering wheel as he strained to see beyond the swirling chaos outside. The truck's radio crackled with emergency broadcasts, warning people to stay indoors and avoid all. Unnecessary travel, Nash said aloud, shaking his head. "Tell that to whoever's stuck out here." 3 miles from town, Nash encountered his first obstacle, a massive pine tree that had fallen across both lanes of the highway. He stopped the truck and assessed the situation through his windshield wipers, which struggled to keep pace with the accumulating snow. The tree's trunk was too thick to move by hand, but there was just enough room to squeeze around its base if he drove partially into the ditch. Nash engaged the truck's differential lock and carefully maneuvered around the fallen tree, feeling the vehicle's undercarriage scrape against hidden rocks and debris. For a heart-stopping moment, the rear wheels spun freely before finding traction again. Nash exhaled slowly and continued up the mountain. The temperature gauge showed -8 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to kill someone within hours if they were stranded without adequate shelter. Nash had seen the aftermath of winter exposure during his years in Montana: frostbite that claimed fingers and toes, hypothermia that shut down organs and stole lives. The luxury car Wade had mentioned would offer some protection, but not enough to survive until morning if the heating system had failed along with the engine. Mile after mile, Nash pushed through the storm, his truck becoming the only moving object in a landscape that had turned completely white. The familiar landmarks along Highway 89 had vanished under the snow, leaving him to navigate by instinct and the faint impression of guardrails barely visible through the blizzard. At the 7-mile mark, Nash spotted something that made his heart skip: fresh tire tracks leading off the road and ending abruptly where a vehicle had clearly slid off the pavement. He stopped the truck and activated his emergency flashes, their red glow barely visible in the swirling snow. Nash grabbed his flashlight and stepped out into the storm. The wind hit him like a physical blow, driving snow into his face with enough force to sting his skin. The cold penetrated his heavy coat within seconds, and he pulled his wool cap down over his ears as he followed the tire tracks toward a dark shape, barely visible 30 feet from the road. The vehicle was a Mercedes sedan, sleek and expensive, now listing at a dangerous angle where it had slid down a shallow embankment. Snow had already begun to accumulate against its sides, and the exhaust pipe was partially buried, which explained why the engine wasn't running. Nash could see a figure in the driver's seat, and his pace quickened. He knocked on the driver's side window, using his flashlight to signal his presence. The window rolled down slowly, revealing a woman in her early 50s with silver-streaked auburn hair and intelligent green eyes that reflected both relief and apprehension. "Thank God," the woman said, her voice carrying a slight tremor from cold or fear. "I was beginning to think no one would come. Ma'am, I'm Nash Rodriguez. Wade Johnson from the gas station in Raven Falls called me about your situation. Are you hurt?" "No, I don't think so. Just cold and rather embarrassed about ending up in this predicament." "I'm Evangeline Kingsley." Nash noted that she spoke with the refined accent of someone educated and well-traveled, but her clothes seemed practical enough for Montana weather. A wool coat, leather boots, and leather gloves that looked expensive but functional. "Well, Miss Kingsley, let's get you out of this weather first, then we'll figure out what's wrong with your car. Can you climb out on this side?" Evangeline gathered a leather purse and what appeared to be a briefcase before carefully exiting the vehicle. Nash steadied her as she climbed up the embankment, noting that despite her obvious unfamiliarity with severe weather conditions, she moved with determination and didn't complain about the difficult circumstances. "My truck's got good heat, and I've got some hot coffee in a thermos," Nash said, guiding her toward his vehicle. "Let's get you warmed up while I take a look at your car." Once Evangeline was settled in the passenger seat of his truck with a cup of coffee, Nash returned to examine the Mercedes. Even in the limited visibility provided by his flashlight, he could see several problems. The exhaust pipe was indeed blocked with snow, which had caused the engine to shut down as a safety measure. More concerning was a pool of fluid beneath the engine compartment, suggesting a damaged oil pan or cooling system. Nash opened the hood and immediately identified the primary issue. The impact with the embankment had cracked the oil pan and damaged several belts. Oil had leaked onto the hot engine block, creating the burning smell that still lingered despite the freezing temperatures. The cooling system appeared intact, but the serpentine belt that drove the alternator and water pump had snapped. "How does it look?" Evangeline called from the truck when Nash returned for additional tools. "It's fixable, but it's going to take some time," Nash replied, pulling on insulated work gloves. "The good news is that nothing's broken that can't be repaired. The bad news is that I'm going to have to do it in these conditions. Is there anything I can do to help?" Nash studied her face in the dashboard light. Most people in her situation would be focused entirely on their own discomfort, but Evangeline seemed genuinely concerned about the difficulty he was about to face. "Just stay warm. This could take a couple of hours, and there's no point in both." "Of us freezing out there." Nash gathered his tools and a portable work light that plugged into his truck's power outlet. The wind had intensified during the few minutes he'd spent examining the Mercedes, and snow was now falling so heavily that his truck was barely visible from 20 feet away. Working underneath a disabled vehicle during a blizzard ranked among the most challenging situations Nash had encountered, but he approached the task with the methodical patience his father had taught him. He crawled beneath the Mercedes, using a piece of cardboard to protect himself from the wet snow, and began assessing the damage to the oil pan. The crack was significant, but not catastrophic. Nash had performed similar repairs before, though never in weather conditions that threatened to freeze his tools to his hands within minutes of exposure. He retrieved a tube of emergency sealant from his kit, the type used by mechanics to provide temporary fixes that could hold until proper repairs were possible. "How are you doing out there?" Evangeline called after 30 minutes had passed. "Making progress," Nash called back, though his voice was muffled by the wind and the fact that he was lying on his back beneath the car. "The oil leak is stopped. Now I need to work on the belt system. The serpentine belt replacement proved more challenging than the oil pan repair. Nash had to remove the cooling fan and several other components to access the belt routing system, and each tool seemed to fight against his increasingly numb fingers. Snow collected in the engine compartment faster than he could clear it away, and he had to repeatedly return to his truck to warm his hands enough to maintain dexterity. "You must be freezing," Evangeline said when Nash climbed back into his truck for the 4th time. "Are you sure this is safe?" "I've worked in worse conditions," Nash replied, though he wasn't entirely certain that was true. "The important thing is getting you back on the road before this storm gets any worse." "Before it gets worse." Evangeline looked out at the white chaos surrounding them. How could it possibly get worse than this? Nash checked the weather radio, where the National Weather Service was updating their blizzard warning. Wind speeds were now gusting to 60 miles per hour, and the snow was expected to continue until dawn. The temperature was dropping toward minus 15 degrees. "Ma'am, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me," Nash said, meeting her eyes. "Do you have somewhere safe to go once we get your car running? Because driving in these conditions is dangerous, even for someone who knows." "These roads," Evangeline hesitated before answering. "I was traveling to a business meeting in Billings. I have reservations at a hotel there, but obviously I'm not going to make it tonight. Billings is 2 hours away in good weather. In this storm, it might as well be on the moon." Nash made a decision that he hoped he wouldn't regret. "There's a motel in Raven Falls that stays open year-round. It's not fancy, but it's warm and safe. If I can get your car running, I'll follow you back into town and make sure you get there safely." The relief in Evangeline's expression was unmistakable. "That's very generous of you, Mr. Rodriguez. I'm already more grateful than I can express." Nash returned to the Mercedes for the final phase of the repair. Installing the new serpentine belt required precise alignment of multiple pulleys, a task that demanded both mechanical skill and physical coordination. His fingers had gone beyond cold into the realm of genuine numbness, and he had to pause frequently to restore circulation. After 90 minutes of work in conditions that would have defeated most people, Nash heard the sweet sound of the Mercedes. Engine turning over and catching, he cleared the remaining snow from the exhaust pipe and watched as the car's heating system began to function normally. "It's running," he called to Evangeline, who had remained in his truck throughout the entire repair, "but we need to get moving before the roads become completely impassable." As they prepared to begin the dangerous journey back to Raven Falls, Nash had no way of knowing that the woman he'd just saved was more than a stranded motorist. He had no idea that his decision to venture out into the storm would set in motion events that would change not only his life, but the lives of everyone in their small Montana community. The blizzard continued to rage around them as they began their slow descent toward town. Two vehicles moving through the white darkness like ships navigating a frozen sea. The journey back to Raven Falls tested every skill Nash had developed during 15 years of driving Montana's mountain roads. He led the way in his pickup truck, maintaining a steady pace of 10 miles per hour while Evangeline followed in the Mercedes, her headlights visible in his rearview mirror like two yellow eyes piercing the storm. The radio crackled with updates from the National Weather Service, reporting that the blizzard had intensified beyond their initial predictions. Highway 89 is now officially closed to all traffic, the dispatcher announced. Emergency crews have suspended operations until conditions improve. Motorists are advised to seek immediate shelter and avoid travel. Nash keyed his CB radio, hoping Evangeline had heard the broadcast. "Ms. Kingsley, are you copying the Weather Service updates?" Her voice came back clear and calm despite the circumstances. "I heard it, Mr. Rodriguez. I suppose we're officially outlaws now." "Just a couple of people trying to get home safely," Nash replied. "How's your car handling?" "Better than I expected, thanks to your repairs. The heating system is working perfectly." Nash smiled despite the tension. Many people would be panicking by now, but Evangeline seemed to possess the kind of composure that came from facing difficult situations before. He found himself curious about her background, wondering what had brought a woman with her obvious education and refinement to this remote stretch of Montana highway during one of the worst storms in years. They encountered two more fallen trees during the descent, requiring Nash to use his truck's winch and tow strap to clear a path. Each obstacle added 30 minutes to their journey, and Nash grew increasingly concerned about the fuel consumption in both vehicles. His truck's gas gauge showed 3/4 full, which should be sufficient, but he had no way of knowing how much fuel remained in the Mercedes. "Ms. Kingsley, how's your fuel situation?" Nash asked over the CB radio as they navigated around a particularly deep snowdrift. "The gauge shows just under half a tank. Will that be enough to reach town?" Nash calculated the remaining distance and fuel consumption rates. "It should be fine, but we'll top off at Wade Station once we get there. He keeps his pumps operational during emergencies." "Mr. Rodriguez, may I ask you something personal?" "Sure. What made you decide to come out in this weather to help a complete stranger? Most people would have waited until morning." Nash considered the question as he steered around another fallen branch. "I guess I was raised to believe that when someone needs help, you help them if you can. My father always said that character gets tested during storms, not during calm weather." "Your father sounds like a wise man." "He was. Lost him 5 years ago, but his lessons stuck around. I'm sorry for your loss. Was he a mechanic as well?" "Best in 3 counties. He taught me everything I know about fixing things." Evangeline's voice carried a note of genuine interest. "Do you have family waiting for you at home?" Nash felt the familiar mixture of pride and worry that always accompanied thoughts of Sky. My daughter, Sky, she's 8 years old, hopefully still asleep and not worried about where her dad disappeared to. She must be very proud of you. I hope so. I try to set a good example, show her that helping people is more important than looking out for just yourself. That's a valuable lesson. Not everyone learns it. The conversation continued as they made their way through the storm, and Nash found himself sharing more than he typically would with a stranger. Something about Evangeline's manner invited confidence. She listened carefully and asked thoughtful questions without seeming to pry. When she mentioned her own travels for business, Nash gathered that she worked in some kind of corporate environment, but she didn't elaborate on specifics. What kind of business brings you to Montana in the middle of winter? Nash asked as they reached the halfway point of their journey. I oversee several companies with operations throughout the region. Sometimes personal visits are necessary to understand how facilities are functioning. Must be important companies if you're willing to drive through weather like this. Important? To the people who work for them, certainly. I believe that leadership requires showing up, especially when conditions are difficult. Nash appreciated that philosophy, having worked for supervisors who disappeared whenever problems arose. Sounds like your employees are lucky to have someone who cares about them. I try to remember that every decision affects real people with families and responsibilities. Numbers on a financial report represent human lives and dreams. They drove in comfortable silence for several miles, the steady rhythm of windshield wipers and the crunch of snow beneath tires creating an oddly peaceful atmosphere despite the dangerous conditions. Nash found himself thinking about Evangeline's words regarding leadership and responsibility. He wondered what it would be like to make decisions that affected hundreds or thousands of people, to carry that kind of weight on a daily basis. Mr. Rodriguez, may I ask what you do for work besides rescuing stranded motorists? Nash chuckled. I run a mobile mechanic service, Rodriguez Mobile Mechanics. Not very glamorous, but I get to help people and work with my hands. How long have you been in business? About 6 months. I used to work at Rocky Mountain Manufacturing until they closed the plant. 347 people lost their jobs in one day. That must have been devastating for the community. Hit everyone pretty hard. Raven Falls isn't a big town, and that plant was the main employer. Lot of good people struggling to figure out what comes next. Nash heard sympathy in Evangeline's voice when she responded. Economic transitions are always painful for working families. I'm sorry you had to experience that. We're getting by. Starting the mobile business seemed like the best way to use my skills and stay in the community. Sky's got friends here, and it's the only home she's ever known. It sounds like you're a devoted father. I try to be. Being a single parent isn't easy, but Sky's worth every sacrifice. They reached the outskirts of Raven Falls just after midnight, the storm showing no signs of abating. The town's few streetlights created small circles of visibility in the swirling snow, and Nash felt profound relief at seeing familiar landmarks. Wade's gas station appeared through the storm like a beacon, its emergency lights still functioning despite the power outages affecting other parts of town. Nash pulled up to the pumps and waited for Evangeline to park the Mercedes alongside his truck. Wade Johnson emerged from the station wearing insulated coveralls and a worried expression. Nash, thank God you made it back safely. I've been monitoring the emergency channels and they're reporting multiple vehicles stranded all over the county. We had some adventures, but Miss Kingsley's car is running fine now, Nash replied, stepping out into the storm. Can you fill both vehicles? And do you have any coffee left? Fresh pot brewing inside. Come on in and warm up. Evangeline joined them at the fuel pumps, moving carefully on the icy pavement. Nash noticed that despite the ordeal they'd been through, she maintained an air of dignity and grace that seemed natural rather than forced. Wade, this is Evangeline Kingsley. Ms. Kingsley, Wade Johnson owns the best gas station in Montana. Wade extended a gloved hand. Pleasure to meet you, ma'am. Sorry it's under these circumstances. The pleasure is mine, Mr. Johnson, and I'm grateful for your station being open during the storm. Emergency services don't stop for weather around here. Let's get these vehicles fueled up and you folks inside where it's warm. While Wade filled the gas tanks, Nash checked both vehicles for any damage from their journey through the storm. The Mercedes showed remarkably few signs of wear considering the conditions they'd traversed, and Nash's repairs appeared to be holding perfectly. His own truck had accumulated several scratches from tree branches and road debris, but nothing that affected its functionality. Inside the station, Wade had prepared cups of strong coffee and sandwiches made from supplies he kept for emergency situations. Nash accepted both gratefully, realizing he hadn't eaten since dinner with Sky earlier that evening. So what's the plan now? Wade asked. The Pine Ridge Motel is still open, but I'm not sure about road conditions between here and there. Nash looked out the station window at the continuing storm. It's only about 2 miles, mostly on flat ground. We should be able to make it if we go slow. Mr. Rodriguez, I can't thank you enough for everything you've done tonight, Evangeline said, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup. You've gone far beyond what anyone could reasonably expect. Just doing what needed to be done. Anyone else would have made the same choice. Wade shook his head. Nash, most people wouldn't have left their warm house to help a stranger in weather like this. You've got something special, and I hope you know it. Nash felt embarrassed by the praise. My father taught me that skills are only valuable if you use them to help people. Tonight was just putting that lesson into practice. Evangeline studied Nash's face in the bright fluorescent light of the gas station. Your father raised a remarkable son. I hope my business colleagues could learn from your example. What kind of business are you in, if you don't mind me asking? Manufacturing and industrial operations primarily. I spend most of my time trying to balance profitability with responsibility to employees and communities. Nash nodded, thinking about his own recent experience with corporate decisions. That sounds like a tough balance to maintain. It is, but tonight has reminded me why it's important to remember the human element in business decisions. Wade interrupted their conversation. Folks, I hate to break this up, but the weather service is saying conditions will get worse before they get better. If you're going to make it to the motel, you should probably head out soon. Nash finished his coffee and gathered his tools. Miss Kingsley, I'll follow you to the motel and make sure you get checked in safely. After that, you should be comfortable until the storm passes. You've already done so much. Are you sure it's not too much trouble? No trouble at all. It's on my way home. As they prepared to leave Wade's station, Nash had no idea that the woman he'd spent the evening helping would soon transform his understanding of what was possible in his life. The storm continued to rage outside, but the most significant weather event of Nash Rodriguez's life was about to be the calm that followed. The Pine Ridge Motel sat on the edge of Raven Falls like a relic from the 1960s, its neon sign flickering intermittently through the storm. Nash pulled into the parking lot first, his headlights illuminating a dozen empty spaces covered in undisturbed snow. The Mercedes followed close behind, and both vehicles came to a stop near the motel office where a single light burned behind frost-covered windows. Looks like we're the only customers tonight, Nash observed as he helped Evangeline navigate the slippery walkway to the office door. Inside, the night clerk looked up from a paperback novel with obvious surprise. Earl Peterson was 73 years old and had been working the night shift at Pine Ridge Motel for 8 years, mostly because his wife insisted he needed something to keep him busy after retirement. Well, I'll be damned, Earl said, adjusting his reading glasses. Didn't expect to see anyone tonight, except maybe the sheriff checking on me. Evening, Earl, Nash said, stamping snow off his boots. This is Miss Kingsley. She needs a room for the night. Earl studied Evangeline with the frank curiosity of someone who'd lived in small towns his entire life. "Ma'am, you picked one heck of a night to be traveling through Montana. You folks get caught in the storm." Her car broke down about 10 miles north of town, Nash explained. "Managed to get it running again, but the roads are too dangerous for her to continue to Billings tonight." "Billings?" Earl whistled low. "In this weather, you might as well try to drive to the moon. Smart decision to hole up here until it blows over." Evangeline approached the registration desk with her purse and the leather briefcase she'd carried throughout their ordeal. "What do you have available?" "Well, let's see," Earl said, consulting a handwritten ledger that looked older than the motel itself. "I've got 12 rooms and right now 11 of them are empty. Take your pick." Something clean and warm would be perfect. Earl selected a key from the board behind him. "Room 7's got the best heating unit and a nice view of the mountains, assuming you can see them once this storm passes. That'll be $45 for the night." Nash watched as Evangeline opened her wallet and placed 3 $20 bills on the counter. "Keep the change, and thank you for staying open during the storm." Earl's eyebrows rose slightly at the generous tip. "Much obliged, ma'am. There's a coffee maker in the room, and I keep the vending machines stocked with snacks. If you need anything during the night, just pick up the phone and dial 0. "Mr. Rodriguez, would you mind walking me to the room?" Evangeline asked. "I'd like to speak with you privately before you head home to your daughter." Nash nodded, curious about what she wanted to discuss. They walked through the covered breezeway to room 7, their footsteps echoing in the enclosed space. Evangeline unlocked the door and stepped inside, turning on the lights to reveal a modest but clean room with a queen bed, small table and 2 chairs by the window. "Please, come in for a moment," Evangeline said, setting her briefcase on the table. "I want to thank you properly for what you've done tonight." Nash remained near the door, feeling suddenly awkward in the intimate setting of the motel room. "Ma'am, there's no need for thanks. Anyone would have done the same thing." "No, Nash, they wouldn't have, and I think you know that." Evangeline removed her coat and hung it in the small closet, then turned to face him with an expression that seemed more serious than their conversation warranted. "I want to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me," she said. "Earlier tonight, you mentioned that you used to work at Rocky Mountain Manufacturing. What was your position there?" Nash found the question odd, but answered directly. "I was a senior maintenance technician, worked on the heavy machinery, did troubleshooting when the engineers couldn't figure out problems." "How long were you employed there?" 8 years. Started right out of high school and worked my way up." Evangeline walked to the window and looked out at the storm, though Nash doubted she could see anything through the swirling snow. "Tell me about the day the plant closed." Nash felt an unexpected tightness in his chest. The memory of that day remained painful, not just for himself, but for all the families whose lives had been upended by a single corporate decision. "It was a Tuesday in September. We came to work like any other day, and at 10 in the morning, they called everyone to the main assembly floor. The plant manager read a statement about market conditions and operational efficiency, said the facility would be closing permanently in 30 days. How did the workers react? Some people cried, some got angry. Most of us just stood there trying to figure out what we were going to do next. 347 people, and just like that, we were all unemployed." Evangeline turned, back to face him, her green eyes reflecting something Nash couldn't quite identify. "What did you think about the decision?" Nash considered his words carefully. "I understood that businesses have to make difficult choices sometimes, but it seemed like they could have found a way to keep the plant operating, maybe with reduced shifts or temporary layoffs instead of a permanent closure. The facility was profitable, just not profitable enough to meet corporate expectations." "Did you feel that the company treated the workers fairly during the transition?" They followed the legal requirements, Nash said diplomatically. Gave us the required notice, paid severance based on years of service, but a lot of people had worked there for decades. 2 months' pay doesn't make up for losing a career you thought would last until retirement. Evangeline nodded slowly, as if his answer confirmed something she'd already suspected. Nash, I need to tell you something important, and I'm not sure how you're going to react. Nash felt a growing sense of unease. Ma'am, if this is about payment for the car repair, I told you that wasn't necessary. It's not about payment, it's about who I am. Evangeline opened her briefcase and removed a folder containing what appeared to be business documents. My full name is Evangeline Kingsley, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Kingsley Industries. We're a holding company that owns several manufacturing facilities throughout the region. Nash felt confused rather than enlightened. Okay, but I'm not sure why that matters. One of the companies we acquired 3 years ago was Rocky Mountain Manufacturing. The words hit Nash like a physical blow. He stared at Evangeline as the implications slowly registered in his mind. The woman whose car he'd repaired, whose life he'd possibly saved during the storm, was ultimately responsible for the decision that had cost him his job and thrown his family into financial crisis. You, Nash said quietly, his voice barely audible above the storm outside, you're the one who closed the plant. Yes, Evangeline replied, meeting his gaze directly. I made that decision. Nash felt a complex mixture of emotions washing over him. Anger, confusion, irony, and something approaching betrayal. He'd spent hours helping the person who had upended his life, risked his safety to save someone who had destroyed his financial security. Why are you telling me this? Nash asked, his voice carefully controlled. Because you have a right to know, and because I need to explain something to you about that decision. Nash moved toward the door, suddenly eager to leave the motel room and return to the familiar safety of his trailer and sleeping daughter. Mom, I think I've heard enough. Please, Nash, give me 5 minutes to explain. Something in her tone made Nash pause with his hand on the door handle. 5 minutes, Evangeline sat down at the small table and gestured for Nash to take the other chair. When Kingsley Industries acquired Rocky Mountain Manufacturing, the facility was losing money, not a little money, significant amounts that threatened the stability of our other operations and the jobs of thousands of workers at our other facilities. Nash remained standing, his arms crossed. The plant was profitable when I worked there. It was marginally profitable, Evangeline corrected. But the machinery was outdated, the building needed major infrastructure repairs, and the competitive environment was changing rapidly. We faced a choice: invest $25 million in upgrades with no guarantee of long-term viability, or close the facility and redirect those resources to operations with better prospects for sustained employment. So you chose to eliminate 347 jobs to protect your profits. I chose to protect 8,000 jobs at our other facilities, Evangeline said firmly. The $25 million we would have spent on Rocky Mountain went instead to expanding operations in Tennessee and Ohio, creating 1,200 new positions, and securing the future of existing employees. Nash felt his anger growing despite his efforts to remain composed. That's just corporate math, numbers on a spreadsheet. You didn't see the faces of the people who lost their jobs, didn't have to watch families figure out how to pay their mortgages and feed their children. You're right, Evangeline admitted. I didn't see those faces. I made the decision based on financial analysis and strategic planning. But Nash, I want you to understand something important. Every business decision involves trade-offs between competing interests. There's rarely a choice that doesn't cause pain to someone. Nash finally sat down, though his posture remained tense. So, that makes it acceptable? It makes it necessary. And it makes it my responsibility to carry the weight of those decisions. They sat in silence for several moments. the storm continuing to rage outside while they processed the revelation that had transformed their relationship from stranger helping stranger to a complex confrontation between corporate executive and displaced worker. "Why are you really here?" Nash asked finally. "In Montana, driving through a blizzard?" Evangeline met his eyes directly. They was coming to Raven Falls to see the community impact of closing Rocky Mountain manufacturing, to understand how the decision affected people like you. Nash stared at her, trying to process this additional information. "You were coming here specifically? I make it a point to visit communities affected by our business decisions, not for public relations or legal compliance, but because I believe I owe it to the people whose lives we've changed to see the consequences firsthand." "And what did you plan to do once you got here? Take a tour of the unemployment office?" Evangeline's expression remained serious. "I plan to meet with community leaders, visit with families affected by the closure, and determine what assistance Kingsley Industries might provide to help with economic transition." Nash felt his worldview shifting as he tried to reconcile. The woman who had spent the evening demonstrating genuine concern for his well-being with the corporate executive who had eliminated his livelihood. So tonight was just a coincidence. Complete coincidence, but Nash, it's shown me something I couldn't have learned from any report or financial analysis. "What's that?" "It's shown me the character of the people whose lives our decisions affect. And it's reminded me that every number on a financial statement represents someone like you, someone willing to risk their own safety to help a stranger, someone who puts family and community above personal gain." Nash stood up again, needing to move, to think, to process everything he'd learned. "I need to get home to my daughter." "Of course. But Nash, I hope you'll consider meeting with me tomorrow after the storm passes. There are things I'd like to discuss with you, opportunities I'd like to explore." "What kind of opportunities?" "The kind that might benefit not just you and Sky, but the entire Raven Falls community." Nash paused at the door, his hand on the handle. "Ms. Kingsley, I appreciate everything you've said tonight, but I'm not sure I'm ready to hear about opportunities from the person who cost me my job in the first place." "I understand, but Nash, sometimes the people who create problems are also the ones best positioned to create solutions." Nash stepped out into the storm without responding, his mind reeling. From the evening's revelations, as he drove home through the continuing blizzard, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't yet imagine. The drive home from Pine Ridge Motel felt longer than Nash's earlier journey through the storm, though the distance remained the same, 2 miles of treacherous mountain roads. His mind churned with conflicting emotions as he navigated the familiar route back to Silver Dollar Mobile Estates, windshield wipers fighting a losing battle against the relentless snowfall. Nash tried to make sense of the evening's revelations. The woman he'd risked his life to save was the same person whose corporate decisions had thrown his family into financial crisis. Yet during their hours together in the storm, Evangeline had demonstrated genuine kindness, intelligent conversation, and sincere gratitude for his help. The contradiction left him feeling unsettled and confused about what to think or feel. "Damn it," Nash muttered as he turned into the trailer park, his truck's headlights sweeping across snow-covered mobile homes. Why couldn't she have just been a regular stranded motorist? The storm had deposited another 4 inches of snow while Nash was away, and he had to use 4-wheel drive to climb the slight hill leading to his trailer. The familiar sight of home brought some comfort, though he noticed that his neighbor Bonnie Thompson's lights were still on despite the late hour. Nash parked his truck and gathered his tools from the back, pausing to look toward Pine Ridge Motel, though it was invisible through the storm. Somewhere in that modest room, Evangeline Kingsley was probably reviewing business documents or making phone calls to corporate headquarters, planning whatever opportunities she'd mentioned. The thought made him feel manipulated. as if the entire evening had been some kind of elaborate corporate strategy. But that was unfair, Nash realized as he climbed the steps to his trailer. Evangeline couldn't have orchestrated a blizzard or arranged for her car to break down at precisely the right moment to encounter him. The coincidence was extraordinary, but it was still just coincidence. Nash opened the trailer door as quietly as possible, hoping not to wake Skye. The familiar warmth and smell of home enveloped him like a welcome embrace after hours in the bitter cold. He hung his coat on the hook by the door and checked the note he'd left on Skye's nightstand. It remained where he'd placed it, suggesting she'd slept through the entire night without realizing he was gone. The digital clock on the kitchen stove showed 2:47 a.m. Nash made a cup of instant coffee and sat at the small dinette table, finally allowing himself to fully process the night's events. He'd performed one of the most challenging repairs of his career under the worst possible conditions, engaged in meaningful conversation with an intelligent woman, and discovered that fate had a twisted sense of humor. Nash's phone buzzed with a text message from Wade Johnson. "Hope you made it home safely. Weather service says storm should clear by morning. Thanks for helping that lady tonight." Nash typed back, "Made it fine. Thanks for staying open." Another message appeared almost immediately. "She seemed like quality people. Not many folks with that kind of class end up stranded in Montana blizzards." Nash stared at the phone screen, wondering how Wade would react to learning that the quality people he'd served coffee was the same corporate executive responsible for closing the largest employer in their community. The irony seemed almost too perfect to be real. Nash walked to the window and looked out at the storm, which showed signs of finally beginning to weaken. The wind had decreased from its earlier fury, and the snow fell more steadily rather than in the chaotic swirls that had characterized the blizzard's peak. By morning, the roads would be passable again, and life in Raven Falls would return to its normal patterns. But Nash suspected that nothing in his life would be quite normal anymore. Evangeline's final words echoed in his mind. Sometimes the people who create problems are also the ones best positioned to create solutions. What kind of solutions could she be contemplating? And why should he trust anything offered by someone who had already demonstrated the power to eliminate his livelihood with a single business decision? Nash finished his coffee and prepared for bed, though he doubted sleep would come easily. As he brushed his teeth, he caught sight of his reflection in the small bathroom mirror. The man looking back at him appeared older than his 34 years, with lines around his eyes that seemed deeper than they had that morning. The stress of financial uncertainty and single parenthood had taken its toll, but tonight's events had added another layer of complexity to his already challenging life. He checked on Skye one more time, adjusting her blankets and ensuring that the small space heater in her bedroom was functioning properly. His daughter slept peacefully, unaware that her father had spent the evening with the person who might hold the key to their family's future. Nash wondered what kind of opportunities Evangeline had in mind, and whether accepting help from her would feel like betraying the other workers who had lost their jobs when Rocky Mountain Manufacturing closed. Nash finally settled into his own bed at 3:30 a.m., listening to the storm gradually subside outside his bedroom window. Sleep eluded him as his mind replayed the evening's conversations, searching for clues about Evangeline's true intentions and motivations. Was her interest in visiting Raven Falls genuine, or simply another corporate public relations strategy? Did she really care about the community impact of her decisions? Or was she looking for ways to minimize legal liability? The questions multiplied faster than Nash could process them, and he found himself thinking about his father's advice regarding complex situations. When you can't figure out what someone's really after, watch what they do instead of listening to what they say. Evangeline's actions during the storm had been consistently generous and thoughtful. She'd expressed genuine concern for Nash's safety, asked thoughtful questions about his family and work, and demonstrated respect for his skills and knowledge. Even after revealing her identity and the potential conflict between them, she'd remained honest and direct rather than defensive or manipulative. But actions could be calculated as easily as words, Nash reminded himself. Corporate executives didn't reach their positions without learning how to manage relationships and create favorable impressions. Everything Evangeline had done could be explained as sophisticated damage control rather than genuine character. Around 4 a.m., Nash heard the storm finally begin to quiet. The constant howling of wind decreased to occasional gusts, and the steady percussion of snow against his bedroom window faded to intermittent tapping. The worst of the blizzard had passed, leaving behind a transformed landscape that would take days to fully clear. Nash dozed fitfully until 6 a.m., when his alarm clock announced the beginning of another day. He felt exhausted but alert, his mind already working through the practical implications of the previous night's events. Regardless of Evangeline's motives or offers, he still faced the same financial pressures that had existed before the storm. Bills still needed to be paid, his daughter still needed food and clothing, and his mobile mechanic business still required customers to remain viable. Nash showered and dressed quietly, then started coffee and began preparing breakfast. Skye appeared in the kitchen doorway at her usual time, seemingly unaware that anything unusual had occurred during the night. "Morning, Daddy. Did it snow a lot?" Nash looked out the kitchen window at the white expanse that had once been their small yard. Snow had drifted against the trailer's skirting in places, creating sculptures that reached nearly to the windows. "Quite a bit, sweetheart. Probably a foot and a half, maybe more. Will I have to go to school today?" Nash checked his phone for messages from the school district. "Looks like schools are closed today and probably tomorrow. The road crews need time to clear everything." Skye's face brightened with the prospect of unexpected vacation days. "Can we build a snowman?" "We'll see. I might have some work to catch up on today." Nash prepared scrambled eggs and toast, the same breakfast they'd shared the previous morning, though everything felt different now. As they ate, Nash found himself studying his daughter's face, trying to imagine how their lives might change if Evangeline's mysterious opportunities proved to be substantial rather than symbolic. "Daddy, you look tired. Did you sleep okay?" Nash realized he'd been staring into his coffee cup for several minutes. "Just thinking about grown-up stuff, baby. Nothing for you to worry about." "Is it about money again?" The question reminded Nash that children noticed more than adults gave them credit for. "Partly, but also about some interesting people I met yesterday." "What kind of people?" Nash considered how much to explain. "Someone whose car broke down in the storm. I helped fix it and we had some good conversations. Were they nice?" "Yes, very nice, but also complicated." Skye nodded solemnly, as if she understood that adults often found nice people complicated for reasons that made sense only to other adults. After breakfast, Nash checked the weather forecast on his phone. The storm system had moved east, leaving behind clear skies and temperatures that would remain below freezing for several days. Road crews were already working to clear major highways, but secondary roads, like the one leading to Silver Dollar Mobile Estates, would take longer to become fully passable. Nash spent the morning organizing his tools and equipment, a ritual that helped him think through complex problems. As he worked, his phone rang several times with calls from potential customers who needed assistance with vehicles that wouldn't start in the cold weather. The storm that had nearly killed him the night before was now generating the kind of business his mobile mechanic service desperately needed. By noon, Nash had scheduled 4 service calls for the following day, assuming the roads became passable. The potential income from those jobs would cover his rent and part of the electric bill, providing the first financial relief he'd experienced in weeks. As he prepared to leave for his first call of the day, Nash found himself looking toward Pine Ridge Motel, wondering whether Evangeline was still there or had already departed for her original destination in Billings. Part of him hoped she'd left town without attempting to contact him again, while another part remained curious about what she'd meant by opportunities that could benefit the entire community. Nash's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Mr. Rodriguez, this is Evangeline Kingsley. I'll be staying in Raven Falls for several more days. When you're ready to talk, please call me at this number. Thank you again for everything." Nash stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Whatever Evangeline Kingsley had in mind for him and his community, he wasn't ready to hear it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But as Nash drove toward his first service call of the day, he couldn't shake the feeling that the storm had changed more than the landscape around Raven Falls. Something fundamental had shifted in his world, and he suspected that no amount of snow removal would restore things to the way they used to be. Nash woke up the next morning to the sound of Sky's excited voice calling from the kitchen window. The exhaustion from his adventure in the storm had finally caught up with him, and he'd slept more deeply than he had in weeks, despite the emotional turmoil surrounding his encounter with Evangeline Kingsley. "Daddy! Daddy, come look at this! There are fancy cars outside!" Nash rolled out of bed, immediately alert. Through his bedroom window he could see that the storm had indeed passed, leaving behind a crystalline world of pristine snow sparkling under bright morning sunshine. But what caught his attention wasn't the weather. It was the line of vehicles parked along the narrow road leading into Silver Dollar Mobile Estates. 5 Rolls-Royce sedans sat in perfect formation, their black paint gleaming against the white snow, like a funeral procession that had taken a wrong turn into paradise. Each vehicle was identical, suggesting they'd arrived together as part of some coordinated convoy. Nash had never seen one Rolls-Royce in Raven Falls, let alone 5 of them parked outside his trailer. "Holy hell," Nash whispered, then immediately felt guilty for swearing in front of his daughter. "Daddy, whose cars are those?" Sky asked as Nash joined her at the kitchen window. Nash studied the vehicles more carefully. They were clearly expensive, probably worth more individually than most of the mobile homes in Silver Dollar Mobile Estates. Several of his neighbors had already emerged from their trailers to stare at the unexpected visitors, creating small clusters of people pointing and talking in animated whispers. "I'm not sure, sweetheart. Let me get dressed and find out." Nash pulled on jeans and a flannel shirt, his mind racing through possible explanations for the luxury vehicles. Had some government officials come to investigate the trailer park? Were they lost tourists who'd taken a spectacular wrong turn? The only person Nash could think of who might have access to such vehicles was Evangeline Kingsley, but surely she wouldn't have arranged this kind of dramatic display. Nash stepped outside into the crisp morning air, immediately noticing that the temperature had risen significantly since the previous evening. The snow would probably begin melting within a few days, though the massive drifts created by the storm would take much longer to disappear completely. Bonnie Thompson hurried across the small space between their trailers, her grey hair still in curlers and her bathrobe hastily thrown over flannel pajamas. "Nash, honey, do you know anything about these cars? They showed up about 20 minutes ago, and nobody's gotten out of them yet." Nash could see silhouettes of drivers in each vehicle, suggesting they were occupied but waiting for something or someone. "I have no idea, Bonnie. Maybe they're lost." "Lost?" Bonnie gestured toward the expensive sedans. "Honey, people who drive cars like that don't get lost. They have GPS systems that probably cost more than my entire trailer." Dorothy Crane, the trailer park manager, approached from the direction of the office, carrying a clipboard and wearing the expression of someone dealing with an unusual situation. Dorothy was 72 years old and had managed Silver Dollar Mobile Estates for 15 years, during which time she'd encountered drug raids, domestic disputes, and various legal complications, but nothing quite like this. Nash, these people are asking for you specifically, Dorothy said, slightly out of breath from walking through the deep snow. They won't tell me what they want, just that they need to speak with Nash Rodriguez immediately. Nash felt his stomach drop. They asked for me by name, address, and they even knew which trailer you live in. I told them visiting hours don't start until 9 a.m., but they said they'd wait. More neighbors had gathered to observe the unusual scene, including Carlos and Maria Morales with their 3 children, Nancy Walsh from 2 trailers down, and Jimmy Patterson, the teenager who occasionally helped Nash with his mobile mechanic business. Word of the mysterious visitors was spreading quickly through the small community. "Daddy, are you in trouble?" Sky asked, having followed Nash outside despite his instruction to stay inside. "No, baby, at least I don't think so." As if responding to some unseen signal, all 5 Rolls-Royce doors opened simultaneously. 10 people emerged from the vehicles, 5 drivers in dark suits who remained beside their cars, and 5 passengers who began walking toward Nash's trailer. The passengers were dressed in expensive business attire that looked completely out of place against the backdrop of mobile homes and snow-covered gravel roads. Leading the group was Evangeline Kingsley, her silver-streaked hair perfectly styled, and her wool coat probably worth more than Nash's monthly income. Behind her walked 4 other individuals who carried themselves with the confident bearing of corporate executives or legal professionals. "Mr. Rodriguez," Evangeline called out as she approached, "I hope you don't mind the early visit. I have some matters to discuss with you that couldn't wait." Nash felt heat rise in his cheeks as he became aware of how the scene must appear to his neighbors. Here was Nash Rodriguez, the struggling single father who couldn't afford new clothes for his daughter, being visited by what looked like a board of directors from a Fortune 500 company. "Ms. Kingsley, this is quite a production," Nash said, gesturing toward the luxury vehicles. "Was all this really necessary?" "I believe it was," Evangeline replied, stopping about 6 feet from Nash's front porch. "May I introduce my colleagues? This is David Harrison, our Vice President of Operations, Amanda Richardson from our legal department, Robert Miller, our Regional Manager, and Carol Jenkins, who heads our Human Resources Division." Each person nodded politely as they were introduced, but Nash noticed they were all studying him with the intensity of people conducting a job interview or evaluating a potential business acquisition. "Folks, this is quite a surprise," Nash said, acutely aware that at least 20 of his neighbors were watching the interaction from various distances. "But I'm not sure what we need to discuss that requires this kind of formal delegation." Evangeline smiled, and Nash noticed that her expression seemed genuinely warm rather than calculated. "Nash, yesterday you saved my life during that storm. You risked your own safety to help a complete stranger, demonstrated extraordinary mechanical skills under impossible conditions, and showed me the kind of character that's become rare in today's world." Bonnie Thompson stepped closer, her curiosity overcoming her usual respect for privacy. "Nash, honey, you didn't tell me you helped someone during the storm." "It wasn't a big deal," Nash replied, feeling increasingly uncomfortable with the public nature of the conversation. "It was a very big deal," David Harrison interjected, speaking for the first time. "Ms. Kingsley could have died in those conditions if you hadn't intervened." Sheriff Rick Garcia's patrol car appeared at the entrance to Silver Dollar Mobile Estates, moving slowly through the snow-covered roads. Nash wasn't sure whether the sheriff had been called by concerned residents or was simply investigating the unusual congregation of luxury vehicles in his jurisdiction. "Mr. Rodriguez," Amanda Richardson said, "we understand this is an unusual situation, but we'd like to discuss some opportunities that might be of significant interest to you and your community." What kind of opportunities? Nash asked, though he suspected he already knew the general direction of the conversation. Evangeline gestured toward the cluster of mobile homes surrounding them. Opportunities that could transform Raven Falls and provide economic stability for families like yours. Sheriff Garcia parked his patrol car and approached the group, his hand resting casually on his duty belt in the manner of law enforcement officers assessing potentially complicated situations. "Morning, folks," Sheriff Garcia said, nodding to Nash and the assembled neighbors. "Everything all right here?" "Everything's fine, Rick," Nash replied. "These are business people who wanted to speak with me about some work opportunities." "Sheriff." Garcia studied the 5 Rolls-Royce vehicles with obvious skepticism. Must be some pretty good opportunities to justify this kind of transportation. Carol Jenkins stepped forward with a professional smile. "Sheriff, we represent Kingsley Industries, and we're here to discuss potential economic development projects that could benefit the entire community." "Economic development?" Sheriff Garcia repeated, his tone suggesting he'd heard similar promises before from people who ultimately disappointed local expectations. "We're considering establishing new operations in this region," Robert Miller explained. "Mr. Rodriguez has been recommended as someone who understands both the technical requirements and the community needs that would be involved in such projects." Nash felt overwhelmed by the rapid escalation of what had begun as a simple rescue during a storm. 2 days ago, his biggest concern had been paying his electric bill. Now he was standing in the snow, discussing economic development with corporate executives, while his neighbors watched from their windows and doorways. "Ms. Kingsley," Nash said, "I appreciate whatever you're trying to do here, but this feels like something that should be discussed privately rather than in front of the entire trailer park." "Actually, Nash, I disagree," Evangeline replied. "What we're proposing would affect everyone in this community, and they have a right to know what we're considering." Sky tugged on Nash's sleeve, having remained quiet during the adult conversation, but clearly confused by the unusual circumstances. "Daddy, who are all these people?" Nash picked up his daughter, partly to comfort her and partly to remind himself of what was most important in his life. "These are some business people who think they might have some work for Daddy." "The kind of work that would mean we don't have to worry about money anymore?" Sky asked with the direct honesty that only children possessed. The question created an uncomfortable silence among the assembled adults. Nash realized that his financial struggles weren't as private as he'd hoped, and that his 8-year-old daughter had been more aware of their difficulties than he'd wanted to acknowledge. "That's what we're here to discuss," Evangeline said gently, addressing Sky directly. "Your father is a very talented man, and we think we might be able to offer him opportunities to use his talents in ways that would help lots of people." Dorothy Crane stepped forward with her clipboard, apparently deciding that as trailer park manager, she had some authority in the situation. "Ma'am, I don't know what kind of business you folks are in, but Silver Dollar Mobile Estates is a residential community, not a commercial development zone. If you're planning some kind of industrial project here, you'll need to speak with the County Planning Commission." "We're not planning anything here," David Harrison clarified. "We're simply offering Mr. Rodriguez employment opportunities that would allow him to continue living in his community while working on projects throughout the region." Nash felt the weight of expectation from his neighbors, who were clearly hoping that whatever was being offered might somehow benefit the entire community. At the same time, he remained deeply conflicted about accepting anything from the woman who had cost him his previous job. "Ms. Kingsley," Nash said, "I think we need to have this conversation somewhere more private. My neighbors don't need to be involved in whatever decisions I make about employment." "Of course," Evangeline agreed. But Nash, I want you to understand that what we're offering isn't just a job. It's a chance to make a real difference in the lives of working families throughout Montana. As the group began to disperse, Nash couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. The 5 Rolls-Royce vehicles seemed to represent possibilities he'd never imagined, but also complications he wasn't sure he was prepared to handle. Whatever Evangeline Kingsley had in mind, Nash suspected that by the end of the day, nothing in Raven Falls would ever be quite the same again. Nash arranged for Bonnie Thompson to watch Sky while he accompanied Evangeline and her corporate team to the conference room at Pine Ridge Motel. Earl Peterson had agreed to let them use the small meeting space adjacent to the motel office, though his eyes widened considerably when he saw the 5 Rolls-Royce vehicles following Nash's pickup truck into the parking lot. The conference room hadn't been used for actual business meetings in decades, serving primarily as storage for cleaning supplies and old furniture. But Earl had quickly cleared a table and arranged chairs, clearly understanding that whatever was about to happen would be the most significant business discussion in Pine Ridge Motel's history. Nash sat across from Evangeline and her 4 colleagues, feeling underdressed in his work jeans and flannel shirt compared to their expensive business attire. Amanda Richardson opened a leather briefcase and removed several documents, while David Harrison activated a tablet computer and began referencing what appeared to be financial projections. Nash, Evangeline began, before we discuss specifics, I want you to understand the context of what we're proposing. Yesterday's events didn't just show me your mechanical abilities. They revealed something much more valuable. Which is what? Nash asked, still uncertain about where the conversation was heading. Leadership potential. The way you handled that emergency situation, your decision-making under pressure, your concern for my welfare despite the danger to yourself, these are qualities that can't be taught in business school. Robert Miller leaned forward with a folder containing what looked like organizational charts. Nash, we've researched your employment history at Rocky Mountain Manufacturing. Your supervisors consistently rated you as one of their most capable technicians, but more importantly, they noted your ability to train other workers and solve problems that stumped people with engineering degrees. Nash felt a familiar tension at the mention of his former workplace. That was a long time ago. Not that long, Carol Jenkins interjected. And skills like yours don't disappear just because a facility closes. In fact, we believe your experience there, combined with what we observed yesterday, makes you uniquely qualified for what we have in mind. Evangeline slid a document across the table toward Nash. We're offering you the position of Regional Operations Director for Kingsley Industries' new Montana division. The job would involve overseeing mechanical operations at multiple facilities, training technical staff, and serving as our primary liaison with local communities. Nash stared at the document without picking it up. Regional Operations Director? Ms. Kingsley, I'm a mechanic who runs a small mobile repair business. I don't have any management experience. You have something better than management experience, David Harrison said. You have the respect of working people and the technical knowledge to understand what they're facing. Most corporate managers have never actually performed the jobs they're supervising. Amanda Richardson opened another folder. The position comes with a base salary of $120,000 annually, plus performance bonuses, health insurance, and educational benefits that would cover college tuition for Sky when she's ready. Nash felt the room spinning slightly. The salary figure was more than triple what he'd earned at Rocky Mountain Manufacturing, and nearly 10 times his current income from mobile mechanics. It represented financial security beyond anything he'd imagined possible. There's more, Evangeline continued. We're planning to reopen Rocky Mountain Manufacturing under Kingsley Industries management, but with updated equipment and improved working conditions. We'd like you to oversee the transition and help us hire back as many former employees as possible. The revelation hit Nash like a physical blow. You're reopening the plant? We're establishing a new facility in the same location, yes. The infrastructure is still sound, and our analysis shows that with proper investment and management, the operation can be profitable while providing good jobs for local workers. Nash thought about his former co-workers, many of whom were still struggling to find employment 8 months after the plant closure. How many jobs are we talking about? Carol Jenkins consulted her tablet. Initially, about 200 positions. Within 3 years, we project expansion to over 400 jobs if market conditions remain favorable. And you want me to run this operation? We want you to help us build it correctly from the beginning, Evangeline clarified, to ensure that worker safety and community benefits are prioritized alongside profitability. Nash finally picked up the document Evangeline had placed in front of him. The contract was 12 pages long, filled with legal terminology that would require careful study to fully understand. But even skimming the first page revealed terms that seemed almost too good to be true. Why me? Nash asked. You could hire someone with an MBA and years of management experience for this kind of position. Because MBA graduates didn't risk their lives to save a stranger during a blizzard, Robert Miller replied, because they don't understand what it means to worry about paying rent or feeding their children. Evangeline leaned back in her chair, studying Nash's expression. Nash, I've spent 20 years in corporate management and I've learned that technical skills can be taught, but character cannot. Yesterday showed me that you possess the kind of integrity and judgment that no amount of education can provide. Nash felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was being offered. The salary alone would transform his and Sky's lives, allowing them to move out of the trailer park, provide better educational opportunities, and eliminate the constant financial stress that had dominated their existence for months. What's the catch? Nash asked. Offers like this don't come without strings attached. Amanda Richardson smiled for the first time during the meeting. The catch is that you'd be responsible for the success or failure of operations that affect hundreds of families. The catch is that you'd be accountable to corporate shareholders while advocating for worker interests. The catch is that this job would challenge you in ways you've never experienced. And, Evangeline added, you'd be working for the same company that eliminated your previous job. I understand if that creates ethical concerns for you. Nash appreciated her directness. It does create concerns. How do I know this isn't just a public relations strategy to make the company look good after closing the original plant? Because, David Harrison said, we're investing $40 million in new equipment and facility improvements. Public relations gestures don't typically involve that level of financial commitment. Carol Jenkins placed another document on the table. We're also establishing a profit-sharing program for all employees, something that wasn't offered at the original Rocky Mountain Manufacturing. Workers will receive quarterly bonuses based on facility performance. Nash studied the faces of the people across from him. They appeared serious and professional, but he still found it difficult to believe that such an opportunity could be real. How much time do I have to consider this? We'd like an answer within a week, Evangeline replied. The facility renovation needs to begin soon if we're going to have operations running by next fall. And if I say no, then we'll find someone else, though I doubt we'll find anyone as well suited for the position. Nash folded the contract and placed it in his shirt pocket. I need to think about this, talk to some people, maybe consult with a lawyer about the terms. Of course, Amanda Richardson said. We'd be concerned if you made a decision this important without careful consideration. Evangeline stood up, signaling that the formal meeting was concluding. Nash, I want you to understand something important. This offer isn't charity or guilt-motivated compensation for past decisions. It's a business proposition based on our assessment of your capabilities and potential value to our organization. I appreciate that, Nash replied, though he remained skeptical about the distinction between opportunity and charity. There's one more thing, Robert Miller said. The position would require occasional travel to other Kingsley Industries facilities throughout the region. We'd provide a company vehicle and cover all expenses, but you'd be away from home sometimes. Nash thought about Sky and the difficulty of arranging childcare for business travel. How much travel are we talking about? Probably 1 week per month initially, possibly more during the facility startup phase. The travel requirement added another layer of complexity to an already overwhelming decision. Nash had never been away from Sky for more than a single night, and the thought of regular separations troubled him. As the meeting ended and they prepared to leave the conference room, Evangeline approached Nash privately. I know this is a lot to process, and I know you have concerns about my motivations and the company's intentions. I do have concerns, Nash admitted. Would it help if I explained why I'm really making this offer? Nash nodded, curious to hear her unfiltered thoughts. Yesterday, you showed me what's been missing from corporate decision-making, genuine concern for the human impact of business choices. You treated me as a person in need rather than a stranger to be avoided. That's the kind of perspective we need in leadership positions. So this is about changing corporate culture? It's about changing everything, Evangeline said. About proving that companies can be profitable while treating workers with dignity and respect. About demonstrating that business success and community welfare aren't mutually exclusive. Nash extended his hand to shake hers. I'll give your offer serious consideration, Ms. Kingsley. That's all I can promise right now. That's all I'm asking. If for, Evangeline replied. But Nash, I hope you'll consider not just what this opportunity could mean for you and Sky, but what it could mean for everyone in Raven Falls who's been struggling since the plant closed. As Nash drove home through the snow-covered streets of his small town, he carried with him a contract that could change everything about his life. The weight of the decision ahead felt almost as heavy as the document in his shirt pocket, and he knew that whatever choice he made would affect not just his own future, but the hopes and dreams of an entire community that had been waiting 8 months for a second chance. Nash spent 3 sleepless nights studying the contract, researching Kingsley Industries online, and wrestling with the decision that would determine his family's future. He consulted with Frank Henderson, the only lawyer in Raven Falls, who reviewed the documents and declared them surprisingly fair for a corporate contract. Nash also called Pablo Martinez, his former supervisor at Rocky Mountain Manufacturing, who broke down crying when Nash explained the opportunity to rehire their old crew. Nash, if this is real, you could save this whole town, Pablo had said through his tears. Half our guys are working part-time jobs in Billings, driving 2 hours each way just to make rent. Their families are falling apart. On Thursday morning, Nash made his decision. He called Evangeline's number and arranged to meet at Wade's gas station, choosing the familiar location over the formal conference room at Pine Ridge Motel. When Nash arrived, he found Evangeline waiting, alone, having traded her corporate entourage for solitude and her expensive coat for a practical winter jacket that made her seem more approachable. I appreciate you meeting me here, Nash said as they settled into the station's small office area. Wade had discreetly made himself scarce, though Nash knew he was probably monitoring the conversation from the service bay. I thought you might be more comfortable on your own turf, Evangeline replied. Have you reached a decision? Nash pulled the signed contract from his jacket pocket and placed it on Wade's cluttered desk. I'll take the job, but I have conditions. Evangeline's eyebrows rose slightly. What kind of conditions? First, I want input on hiring decisions at the plant. Pablo Martinez was the best supervisor I ever worked for, and I want him as my assistant manager. There are 15 other guys from the original crew who deserve first consideration for their old positions. Agreed. We were hoping you'd help us identify the most qualified former employees. Second, I want monthly meetings with worker representatives to address safety concerns and operational issues. No major policy changes without employee input. That's actually part of our standard procedure at other facilities. Anything else? Nash took a deep breath before voicing his most important condition. I want a guarantee that if the facility becomes profitable, a portion of those profits will be invested back into the Raven Falls community. Not just employee bonuses, but support for schools, infrastructure improvements, maybe a community center. Evangeline studied Nash's face for a long moment. What percentage are you thinking? 5% of annual profits above baseline projections. Done. We'll establish a community development fund with oversight from local officials. Nash felt a mixture of relief and disbelief. You're agreeing to everything pretty easily. Nash, you're asking for things that any responsible company should want to do anyway. The fact that you're thinking about community impact rather than just personal gain confirms that we made the right choice. They spent the next hour discussing timeline details and operational logistics. The facility renovation would begin immediately, with a target opening date of September 1st. Nash would start his new position on May 15th, giving him time to arrange childcare for Sky and transition his mobile mechanic customers to other local services. There's something else I need to tell you, Evangeline said as their meeting concluded. This morning, our board of directors approved funding for a new elementary school in Raven Falls. The current building is over 60 years old and needs replacement. Nash stared at her in amazement. You're building a school. We're providing the funding. The school board will handle construction and administration. Sky will attend one of the most modern elementary schools in Montana. Why are you doing all this? Evangeline leaned back in her chair, choosing her words carefully. 3 years ago, my daughter Rebecca died in a car accident. She was 28 years old, fresh out of business school, and full of ideas about how corporations could make a positive difference in the world. Nash saw pain in Evangeline's eyes that he hadn't noticed before. I'm sorry for your loss. Rebecca used to tell me that business success meant nothing if it didn't improve people's lives. She said that companies had a moral obligation to strengthen communities rather than extract wealth from them. She sounds like she was a remarkable person. She was. And meeting you reminded me of her values, of the kind of business leader she would have become. Evangeline wiped her eyes with a tissue. This project isn't just about reopening a manufacturing plant, Nash. It's about proving that her vision of ethical capitalism can actually work. Nash felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. I'll do everything I can to make this succeed. I know you will. That's why we chose you. Nash returned home to find Sky building a snowman in their small yard with help from Jimmy Patterson, the teenager from down the street. The sight of his daughter laughing and playing, oblivious to the momentous changes about to transform their lives, filled Nash with both joy and anxiety. Daddy, look at our snowman. Jimmy helped me make him really tall. Nash admired their creation, a lopsided but enthusiastic snow sculpture that stood almost 5 feet high. He's perfect, sweetheart. What's his name? Blizzard Bob, because he's made from the big storm. Nash smiled at his daughter's logic. Blizzard Bob it is. That evening, after Sky had gone to bed, Nash sat at his kitchen table and wrote a letter to his father, something he did whenever he faced major life decisions. He knew his father couldn't read the letters, but writing them helped Nash organize his thoughts and imagine what advice his father might have offered. "Dad," Nash wrote, "I think you would have liked Evangeline Kingsley. She reminds me of what you used to say about people who create solutions instead of just complaining about problems. Tomorrow I'm going to call all the guys from the plant and tell them they can come home. I hope I'm making the right choice." Over the next few days, word of the plant reopening spread throughout Raven Falls like wildfire. Nash's phone rang constantly with calls from former co-workers eager to learn when they could return to work. The local newspaper, which had been struggling to find positive stories for months, ran a front-page article with the headline, "Local Hero Brings Jobs Back to Raven Falls." Nash felt uncomfortable with the hero designation, but he understood that the community needed something to celebrate after 8 months of economic hardship. At the grocery store, neighbors stopped him to express gratitude and offer congratulations. At the school where Sky was enrolled, teachers spoke excitedly about the new facility that would be built within 2 years. "Daddy," everyone at school, "is talking about how you're famous now," Sky said one evening as they shared dinner. "Lisa Rodriguez said you're going to be the boss of a big factory." "I'm going to help run the factory," Nash corrected. "But the most important part of my job will still be taking care of you. Will we have to move away from Silver Dollar?" Nash had been dreading this question. With his new salary, they could afford to live anywhere in Raven Falls or even in a larger city if they chose. But the trailer park had been their home, and their neighbors had become like extended family. "We might get a nicer place to live," Nash said carefully, "but we'll stay in Raven Falls, and we'll always remember the friends who helped us when things were difficult. Can we keep visiting Bonnie Thompson?" "Of course we can. Bonnie will always be part of our family, no matter where we live." On Nash's last day as a mobile mechanic, he completed 3 service calls and officially transferred his remaining customers to Hoss Grease Davis, who had agreed to expand his own repair business to handle the additional work. Nash felt bittersweet about ending the small business he'd built from nothing, but he knew that bigger opportunities sometimes required leaving smaller ones behind. That evening, the residents of Silver Dollar Mobile Estates organized a farewell party in the community center, a converted double-wide trailer that served as meeting space for the trailer park. Bonnie Thompson had coordinated the event, and nearly everyone from the park attended, along with friends from town and several of Nash's former co-workers from Rocky Mountain Manufacturing. Nash Rodriguez has always been the kind of neighbor who shows up when you need help, Bonnie said, addressing the crowd of about 50 people. Now he's going to help all of us by bringing good jobs back to our community. Pablo Martinez stood up to speak, his voice thick with emotion. 8 months ago, we thought our careers were over. Nash is giving us a second chance, and we won't let him down. Sheriff Rick Garcia presented Nash with a certificate of appreciation from the county, recognizing his outstanding service to the community during emergency conditions. Nash accepted the honor graciously, though he still felt overwhelmed by the attention. As the party wound down, Nash found himself standing on the steps of the community center, looking up at the clear night sky. The stars seemed brighter than usual, or perhaps he was just noticing them more clearly, because his future no longer felt clouded by uncertainty. Evangeline Kingsley had left Raven Falls 2 days earlier, but not before stopping by Nash's trailer to say goodbye. "You're going to do wonderful things," she had told him, "not just for our company, but for everyone whose lives you touch." Nash thought about her words as he watched Sky playing with her friends, laughing and running through the snow without any awareness of how dramatically her world was about to change. In 6 months, she would attend a modern elementary school with state-of-the-art equipment and experienced teachers. Her father would earn enough money to provide her with opportunities that had seemed impossible just a week ago. But more importantly, Nash realized nearly 200 families in Raven Falls would have the chance to rebuild their lives, to provide for their children, and to contribute to a community that had faced its challenges with dignity and mutual support. As Nash drove home that night with Sky asleep in the passenger seat, he reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had begun with a simple decision to help a stranger during a storm. He had no way of knowing that his act of kindness would create ripple effects that would transform an entire community, proving that sometimes the most important choices we make are the ones that seem least significant at the time. The blizzard had passed, leaving behind a landscape transformed by snow and possibility, and Nash Rodriguez, the struggling single father who had once worried about paying his electric bill, was about to become the catalyst for the most significant economic recovery in Raven Falls history. Some storms, Nash reflected, don't just change the weather. Sometimes they change everything. The end. Up next, 2 more incredible stories are waiting for you right on your screen. If you enjoyed this one, you won't want to miss this. Just click to watch. And don't forget to subscribe. It would mean a lot.